And welcome to today's Ivanti demo webinar, Optimize Your Compliance with Unified Risk Assessment and Remediation. My name is Melissa Schaff. I'm a Senior Growth Marketing Manager at Ivanti, and today I'll be your host and moderator. We know that organizations have a responsibility to safeguard personal data, but adhering to governance, risk, and compliance standards and proactive maintenance can be challenging with internal alignment and regulation changes. Today, our presenters will show you how to reduce risk and proactively maintain compliance with both external regulations and internal policies using tools and best practices. Our presenters today, we have Dave Pickering, Technical Product Marketing Director, and James Saturnio, also Technical Product Marketing Director. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Dave.
Thanks, Melissa. Thank you very much. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone who's joining us today. As Melissa said, a lot of the companies that are running out there the biggest threat you've got is cyber threat detection. Everyone's going through this process of trying to identify what's causing issues in their environment. Are people trying to hack in? Are they maliciously getting data? And everyone's investing heavily in that cyber threat detection and prevention technologies. But how many people are then going to try and manage that compliance to their regulatory requirements, whether that's a NIST, CMMC, HIPAA, GDPR? How many of you actually do that in an automated way? The majority of organisations, as we find, continue to manage their compliance manually through spreadsheets or some other technique, or they're using outdated tools that don't actually keep up to date with the data silos that they're working against. So in this session, we're going to look at how we actually merge those two so that you can start to automate not only your threat detection, but automate that compliance and manage that in an automated way to simplify what happens when you come out of that, auditing phase. If an auditor comes in and says, I want to look at your information, it's an easy way to manage that and keep on top of it. But before we get into too much depth, let's have a quick poll of what we're talking about. And we want to look at what are the biggest challenges do you have in identifying which vulnerabilities you should action first? And do you have too many data sources? So you have just too much data, you're not sure. You don't have enough data, or it's unreliable data. Not enough time in your day, or you just manually prioritize based on what you think is the right thing to do, or what whoever's screaming at that time. So you can choose multiple of these. You can have all of them. You can have one or two. I'm just interested to understand how you go about identifying what is the vulnerabilities that you should action first. I'll just give you a little bit of time to click on that. And I guess not too surprisingly, we're seeing results that would be reasonably consistent with what we see in the industry. There's too many data sources. There's so much data out there. How do you manage all that data? And then the next one is you've not enough time in your day. So when you've got that much data, naturally you don't have enough time. So how can we automate that for you? How can we ripple that up to the top so you've got some means of managing that in a more reliable way? And then we're talking about not enough data, or it's unreliable. That depends on where your data source is coming from. What are you relying that against? How you're managing that? And then of course there's always the manual technique. I'm just going to push out these because it sounds like it's an important thing. So thank you for answering that poll. That data is reasonably consistent with what we see across most organisations. And one of the biggest challenges, as we've already identified, I guess, is I need to remediate these issues that we have. And they could be from some sort of threat actor trying to get into your system. It could be a finding that is out there that's trending maybe out on the environment. It could be a vulnerability that's out there. And you need to remediate those quickly. But at the same time, your organisation no doubt has some sort of regulatory compliance that they need to meet. And as I mentioned, it could be NIST, it could be PCI, it could be HIPAA, GDPR, CCPA, ISO 27001, and you could name a whole lot of other ones, or it could be an internal policy that you're having to manage against. So how do you balance that process of fixing the issue quickly, but then also managing that against your requirements? How do we go about doing that? What do we need to do to get that in play so that we can actually manage? And then you have the next challenge, which we've already identified. There's way too much data out there. There's vast amount of data from different data sources. And where do you start? How do you actually get to that point of going, I know exactly what I need to do. I know when I have to have it done by. What do I want to do? I'm going to hand over to James now, and he's going to talk through what we call just a simple 3-step process, and let James talk through what we talk about. James.
Yeah, thank you, Melissa and Dave. Yeah, here is our 3-step workflow that Dave and I will demonstrate today. First, as a security analyst, I will quickly and effectively prioritize which high-risk vulnerabilities are affecting my environment, and then create a list of CVEs using Ivanti neurons for risk-based vulnerability management, or RBVM is what we call it. I can then pass on this list to the IT ops team to first assess and document the process for compliance, and also if these vulnerabilities actually require fixing or not, using our Ivanti neurons for ITSM and Ivanti neurons for GRC application. And once assessed, the last step is to remediate these vulnerabilities using Ivanti neurons for patch management, where we will match these patches to these high-risk vulnerabilities, which can then be scheduled and rolled out to vulnerable endpoints within the required service level agreement time. And this workflow can be completed within a matter of hours and not days. So there are hundreds of thousands of known vulnerabilities, as Dave mentioned. Too much data, right? You can't possibly remediate each one that shows up in your environment. And the good news is you don't have to. And as shown here, the percentage of known vulnerabilities that represent any real risk is incredibly low. And now comes the bad news, though. Say an organization wants all trending ransomware vulnerabilities remediated within 5 to 7 days. That creates a small window in which the security team must identify and prioritize such vulnerabilities for remediation if the organization is to maintain compliance. And luckily, Ivanti has the right solution to solve this problem. Now, on to the demo. It can often be difficult for security teams to prove the impact their actions and investments have on the organization's risk profile. The executive dashboard in Ivanti neurons for our BVM and ASOC solves that issue. One of the most powerful elements of the executive dashboard is the Ivanti RS3 widget. Ivanti RS3 is a proprietary scoring algorithm that provides a quantified view of an organization's risk profile. Like credit scores, the value of an Ivanti RS3 score falls in the range of 300 to 850, with higher scores indicating better overall security against cyber threats and exploits. The Ivanti RS3 scoring methodology considers 4 elements. The first is Ivanti's proprietary vulnerability risk rating. The second is the business criticality of an asset. The third is threat intelligence provided by Ivanti neurons for vulnerability knowledge base, or VulnKB. And the fourth is accessibility, which is the address type of each asset that describes the ability for the asset to be accessed via an external or internal pathway. As shown on the widget, this organization's Ivanti RS3 score is 549, putting it in the high-risk range. Available filter overview widgets offer a glimpse into how particular threats manifest themselves in your environment. This widget here would allow executives to see how the efforts of the security analyst is helping the organization achieve its mandate of remediating all the vulnerabilities in the CISA Known Exploited Vulnerabilities catalog. One of the many dashboards includes a funnel which presents ransomware threats in order of increasing risk. The funnel is also one of many visual queries in the user interface that lets security analysts drill down for more detailed data. Let's go ahead and drill down on the trending ransomware vulnerabilities, since those are the ones the hypothetical organization in this example wants remediated first. This takes us to a list view with a filter applied, so only findings associated with trending ransomware vulnerabilities are displayed. For our first step to start the remediation process of these ransomware vulnerabilities, I will create a ticket within our BVM that will automatically create a corresponding incident within our integrated Ivanti neurons for ITSM. That incident will then be processed by my colleague wearing his IT GRC manager's hat, David Pickering, and assessed further for any governance, risk, and compliance remediation requirements in the next steps. Although before we hand it off to Dave, our second step is to assign the list of high-risk ransomware vulnerabilities to a patch group that will automatically be created within our integrated Ivanti neurons for patch management, streamlining the remediation of these vulnerabilities for the patch team, saving them time and unnecessary effort. To do so, the security analyst simply selects the findings and adds them directly to a patch group, or in this case, we will add them to a new patch group that will be automatically created in Ivanti neurons for patch management. The CVEs associated with the selected findings will then be mapped to applicable patches for testing and deployment by patch admins. With just a few clicks, we've passed some of the highest risk vulnerabilities in our environment to the IT team for remediation.
As we've just seen, James has discovered several weaknesses that need to be taken care of. Before we take any steps to do so, we would like to analyse the risk and determine what the consequences would be for our organisation if this problem is not remediated. As we have seen within the risk-based vulnerability management solution, James has created an incident with Ivanti neurons for ITSM and brought all the relevant data from within RBVM. We can see here the incident, the related CVEs or findings that we have, who logged it, our priority, and also link that to any assets or CIs that may be impacted by this particular vulnerabilities. The GRC solution provides much more than just risk assessments. The GRC solution goes across managing and linking back to any regulatory or authoritative documents that you may have. For example, in this scenario, we're looking at ISO 27001. When we look at ISO 27001 or any of the authoritative documents, we'll have our description, but then we have the citations that we need to manage against. Citations are anything that you've been given from ISO 27001. However, most organisations won't necessarily be required to meet all of those. And there's a process of narrowing down what do you want to work against. And in this particular case, we could say, we just want to look at what do we need to look at that requires evidence. And we can see we've narrowed down the number of citations from 114 to 29. So the citation we're working against in this particular scenario is our information security incident management citation. And this is linked back to our authoritative document, which is our ISO 27001. And within that, it then links to controls. And what are those controls? The controls here are linked to our high-risk vulnerabilities to be patched within 7 days. So we need to manage to that control. And when we look further into that control could also be linked to other citations. And it's also part of our policy, which is our policy is linked to information security policy. So let's go through the process of this incident. We're now going to create a risk assessment of the incident. So I'm going to go and create that risk assessment. Our risk assessment gets created. And then when we go in to look at that risk assessment, what we're doing is determining what is our threat analysis and risk mitigation that we're concerned about. So in this scenario, we then have a series of questions. We have questions that are related to our threat analysis, and we have our risk mitigation questions. And what we do is go through and answer these particular questions. Does the function of this business service depend on outside resources? Now we would then give that an answer. Is it high, very high, medium? And depending on how we answer these, we'll start to progress how that risk assessment looks. Let's quickly go through and set all these values to a high level. We can say we've finished our threat analysis, and now we want to go through our threat mitigation. And again, we'll do a similar thing here, where we're going to set those to strong. And we have those questions. And these questions could be defined by your organisation. So once we've done that, we'll save that. We'll get a unmitigated risk score and a mitigated risk score. So here we can see we've got a high and a mitigated risk of low. We then need to determine what else do we want to do against this. We've determined our risk, we've determined that we need to do something about that risk, or it might be we don't need to. But how do we manage that? We can link this risk assessment to an existing risk, if that was something that was available to us or something that was relevant, and any of those we can link to. And we can also link that to an existing control so that we can continue to link back to our authoritative documents. In this particular case, we could say we're linking that to our high vulnerabilities control. We then make the decision, do we do a mitigation plan or is this an exception? An exception would be something where we're not going to go forward because we've determined that these servers are not relevant moving forward, and we'll make an exception. But if we do go down the path of a mitigation plan, then we create a new mitigation plan. So we're creating a mitigation plan, we're documenting it, who owns that, and when do we need that done? And in this case, I put that 7 days out. If we go and drill into that mitigation plan a little bit more, we can see we've got the same information, but now what we want to do is allocate a task to an appropriate individual to go through and patch the servers. So now we create a task. So we've created a task that we've assigned to James, and James would be going through that process of then patching the environment and closing off this task. Once that task is closed off, we can close off our mitigation plans and all other work. Now we can keep track of what work is going on and how James is going against that particular task and mitigation plan. We have our dashboards which are supplied out of the box in the GRC solution. And I can come in to look at my mitigation plan dashboard. I can see we've got a remediate all servers. It's allocated to James. And it has one task still to complete. So we know there's still work to do, but we also know that it's in progress. So we can keep track of that. We can look at any of the statuses of these mitigation plans and what they are by status. In addition to that, we can also look at our risks. So get a high level view of what risks are currently out there, what the likelihood or impact of those happening is, what those any link to policies that require review. We can look at our controls and citations and look at how we're managing against our controls and citations. And finally, we can look at any audits that may be occurring out in our environment. And within that, we can see what audits, when are they upcoming, and we also have an audit calendar to track any audits that may be occurring in our environment that we need to be concerned about. So GRC gives you overall visibility of everything within your environment so you can track that and manage against your regulatory compliances. Let's hand it back to James to go and patch the environments now.
Inside the Patch Intelligence module of Ivanti Neurons for Patch Management, by selecting the patch group we created within Ivanti Neurons for our BVM, we can see all the provided vulnerabilities are mapped to applicable patches. These vulnerabilities will be patched within 5 to 7 days as prescribed by the GRC tasks and requirements established in the previous steps. Automating these tasks saves IT operations team members hours of effort every time the security team sends them a new batch of CVEs, driving down mean time to remediation. To decrease remediation times even more, patches can be deployed autonomously to thousands of machines in minutes. The IT patch admin can select to patch both Windows and macOS hosts that are included for the patch group. And finally, the patch admin can set the patch schedule recurrence where the deployment of patches are rolled out either daily or weekly, and in this example, specifically on Sunday at midnight, which is in alignment with the service level agreement of 5 to 7 days for remediation. The last optional step is to create a compliance report within Ivanti Neurons for Patch Management based on the ransomware patch group we created with a VRR and severity score of 9 or above, and we can choose to save or save and run this report. That is it. That is the final step to our demo. In summarization, Dave and I demonstrated how Ivanti neurons for RBVM and ASOC quickly and efficiently identify the high-risk ransomware vulnerabilities that needed to be remediated within 5 to 7 days within our environment. We created a ticket within RBVM and ASOC that automatically created an incident within Ivanti neurons for ITSM and Ivanti neurons for GRC that was processed for governance, risk, and compliance requirements. And finally, we created a patch setting to automatically patch these ransomware vulnerabilities within 5 to 7 days. I got a little ahead of myself there. Yeah, what Dave and I just demonstrated is a better workflow to prioritize, then assess and document, then remediate the high-risk vulnerabilities within your environment. And this workflow enables teams to focus on these select vulnerabilities that put your organization at risk, and one that replaces manual vulnerability management processes with automation to minimize errors and mean time to remediation, and one that breaks down the walls between IT and security teams to ensure truly critical vulnerabilities are resolved in a timely fashion. I'm going to hand it back to Dave here.
Yep, thanks, James. And when you look at the governance, risk, and compliance tools, there's the 3 core areas we're looking at: manage your governance, identify risks and mitigate them, and then making sure you meet your compliance. And it's enabling you to help work against your best practice frameworks, whether that's NIST, ISO 27001, CMMC, or whatever compliance framework you're requiring to do. It aids in building your business case for security to acquisition, potentially if you're identifying initial issues. It reduces that audit and governance costs that you might have, especially where it's repetitive and manual tasks. And managing an enterprise risk in a consistent process, so automate it whenever possible, and streamlining the entire process for you, including bringing on new vendors, for example, and streamlining those audit reports and enabling you to make sure you meet your compliance requirements easily and quickly. So let's go ahead and look at any questions you might have.
Thanks, Dave and James. We've had a couple of questions come through. I believe that you may have already answered this one, but does the solution provide out-of-the-box authority documents such as CMMC or ISO 27001?
So we don't actually provide the out-of-the-box documents. You can load those documents up through imports from the source that you received them. And the reason we don't do that is a lot of these authoritative documents often you need to pay for, so you'll be paid for directly from, you have to pay the organization to get them. Like for ISO, you get the ISO 27001 and then we load it in. However, we are looking at early next year to link in with the Unified Compliance Framework, or UCF, and use their documents that they have. And they have all these standardized documents on there, so we'll automatically be able to bring them in from UCF and have them preloaded. So we are looking at doing that in the near term.
Great. The next one is, can I adjust the risk assessment survey questions and weightings?
Yes, you can. It's all configurable. Any of those questions are configurable. What we showed today was just some sample questions that we have within our environment, but each organisation is going to have their own different survey questions and their different weightings on what's important to that organisation. So those are all configurable by each organisation so that they get the correct mitigated risk and unmitigated risk.
We have one final question. Does the solution help with the upcoming PCI DSS version 4.0 update?
I'll take this one, Melissa. Thanks. Yeah, yes, absolutely. Specifically requirements 6 and 11. Ivanti neurons for risk-based vulnerability management, RBVM, and ASOC, application security orchestration and correlation. These are tongue twisters, right? Aggregates scanner data. It scans for host and application vulnerabilities. And these scans can be scheduled based on whatever guidelines or requirements are prescribed by the authoritative sources. It combines the essential security technologies you need to demonstrate compliance, including asset discovery, vulnerability assessment, and others. And this solution provides predefined compliance reports out of the box and automatic threat intelligence updates, helping you stay in compliance with continuous security monitoring. Hopefully that was a long-winded answer. That answered it.
Great, thanks, James. Those are all the questions that have come in. So I want to thank everybody for their time today. Thanks for joining us for this demo webinar. And everybody have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you next time.